Yoga Vasistha. The science of self-realization. Valmiki. They who are fully awakened and who are constantly engaged in samadhi and who are thoroughly enlightened are known as samkhya-yogis. They who have reached the state of bodiless consciousness through pranayama, etc., are known as yoga-yogis. Indeed, the two are essentially the same. The cause of this world appearance and bondage is indeed the mind. Both these paths lead to the end to the mind. Hence, by the devoted and dedicated practice of either the end to the movement of prana or the end to thought, liberation is attained. This is the essence of all scriptures dealing with liberation. Rama asked, "O sage, if the end to the movement of prana is liberation, then death is liberation. And all people attain liberation at death." Vasistha replied, "O Rama, when prana is about to leave the body it already makes contact with those elements, with which the next one is to be fashioned. These elements are indeed the crystallization of the vasanas, psychological conditioning, memory store, past impressions and predisposition, of the individual self, the reason why the individual self clings to those elements. When the prana leaves the body it takes with it all the vasanas of the individual self. Not indeed until these vasanas have been destroyed will the mind become no mind. The mind does not abandon the life force till self-knowledge arises. By self-knowledge the vasanas are destroyed and thus the mind, too. It is then that the prana does not move. That indeed is the supreme peace. It is by self-knowledge that the unreality of the concepts concerning worldly objects is realized. This puts an end to vasanas and to the link between the mind and the life force. Vasanas constitute mind. Mind is the aggregate of the vasanas and naught else. If the latter cease, that itself is the supreme state. Knowledge is the knowledge of the reality. Vijara or inquiry itself is knowledge. Total dedication to one thing, restraint of prana and the end to the mind, if one of these three is perfected, one attains the supreme state. The life force and the mind are closely related like a flower and its fragrance, or sesame seed and oil. Hence, if the movement of thought in the mind ceases, the movement of prana ceases, too. If the total mind is one-pointedly devoted to a single truth, the movement of mind and therefore of life force ceases. The best method is by inquiring into the nature of the self which is infinite. Your mind will be completely absorbed. Then both the mind and the inquiry will cease. Remain firmly established in what remains after that. When the mind does not crave for pleasure it is absorbed into the self, along with the life force. Ignorance is non-existence, self-knowledge is the supreme state. Mind alone is ignorance when it appears to be a reality. The realization of its non-existence is the supreme state. If the mind remains absorbed even for a quarter of an hour it undergoes a complete change, for it tastes the supreme state of self-knowledge and will not abandon it. The very seeds of samsara, world appearance or cycle of birth and death, are fried. With them, ignorance is dispelled and the vasanas are utterly pacified. One who has reached this is rooted in sattva, truth. He beholds the inner light and rests in supreme peace. 6.1-69 Rama, expand the mind with the mind. Remain at peace within yourself, seeing the one infinite being in all. Like the king Bhagrat, you will achieve the impossible if you are able to remain firm in your knowledge of the truth, and if you engage yourself in appropriate action in a life characterized by effortless experiencing of the natural course of events. 6.1-73 He, King Bhagirata, approached his Guru Tritala and prayed, "Lord, how can one put an end to this sorrow and to old age, death and delusion which contribute to repeated birth here. Tritala said, sorrow ceases, all the bondages are cut and doubts are dispelled, when one is fully established in the equanimity of the self for a long time, when the perception of division has ceased and when there is the experience of fullness, through the knowledge of that which is to be known. What is to be known? It is the self which is pure and which is of the nature of pure consciousness, which is omnipresent and eternal. Bhagavata asked, I know that the self alone is real and the body, etc., are not real. But how is it that it is not perfectly clear to me? Tritala said, such intellectual knowledge is not knowledge. An attachment to wife, son and house, equanimity in pleasure and pain, love of solitude, being firmly established in self-knowledge, this is knowledge, all else is ignorance. Only when the ego sense is thinned out does this self-knowledge arise. Bhagavata asked, since this ego sense is firmly established in this body, how can it be uprooted? Tritala replied, by self-effort and by resolutely turning away from the pursuit of pleasure. And by the resolute breaking down of the prison house of shame, false dignity, etc. If you abandon all this and remain firm, the ego sense will vanish and you will realize that you are the Supreme Being. 6.1-74 Story of Leela. Vasistha said, Rama, in order to relieve you from this dubious predicament of yours and to attain quiescence of mind, I shall tell you a story about king named Padma. He rejoiced in the possession of piousness and right discrimination. On his arms rested Vijayalakshmi, or the goddess of victory. His royal partner went by the name of Leela and had the good qualities of strictly conforming to her husband's mind. She lived inseparable from him, like his shadow and mind. A thought flashed across her mind to adopt some means by which she could ever perpetuate the youth of her lovely lord, free from old age and death, and so enjoy his company always. For this purpose, she consulted with the Brahmins well versed in all the ancient four Vedas. They were unable to hit upon any means of arresting death in this world. Japas, utterances of mantras, tapas, religious austerities, provide siddhis, psychical powers. Thereupon Leela thought within herself thus, if I should die before my Lord, then I shall enjoy nirvanic bliss unattended by any pains. But if he should die before me, I can be happy only in the event of his jiva living in my house and casting its gladsome glance on me. I shall worship goddess Saraswati. So without appraising her husband of her intentions, she was engaged in meditation for 10 months, when Saraswati, overjoyed at her meditation, appeared visibly before her and asked, O Leela, what is your desire? Please grant me the two boons. 1. To allow my husband's self to remain in my house, even after his death, and 2. That you will appear before me whenever I should think of you. Goddess Saraswati granted her the boons. Then the wheel of time rolled on rapidly and King Padma died. Goddess Saraswati told Leela to cover up her deceased husband's body with flowers. Then the flowers only will fade and not the body. The king's self without quitting the body will rest in the golden harem. Then resting on the arms of the king, you can overcome your grief. So saying, Saraswati vanished from view. Leela buried her husband's body in flowers. Leela addressed Saraswati thus, I can no longer endure parting from my king. Thou should take me soon to where he is. Thereupon Saraswati said thus of the 3 kinds of akasa, vis, chid akasa, spiritual ether, chitta akasa, or mental ether, and akasa, or elemental, gross ether. Chitta akasa is that intermediate state in which the mind is, when it flits from one object to another in the elemental akasa of objects. When the hosts of sankalpas, thoughts in us, perish, then it is that the light of Chit, consciousness, which will shine in us, which is quiescent and immaculate and manifests itself as the universe. If one becomes convinced of the unreality of the visible objects, then, through that self-knowledge, he will attain at once Chidakas. May you attain through my grace that Chidakas, supreme consciousness. Through this blessing, Leela went into Nirvikalpa Samadhi and was able to escape out of her body, by becoming desireless, egoless and with quiescence of mind. There in the heart of Jnana-akasa, or Chidakas, she saw, in a large town, a valiant prince 16 years old. Having recognized him to be her dear husband, she entered the king's palace. She visited many temples and holy places in this kingdom and then returned to her home. She entered her body lying beside her husband, and she prayed for goddess Saraswati. Having saluted Saraswati, Leela questioned her, "How is it that my husband even after his death, has subjected himself to another amurtha, formless, creation which is as illusory and bondage-giving as the present state? Please remove my doubts with reference to this, so that I may know the real truth." To which Saraswati replied thus, "The original evolution of the Supreme Parabrahma, infinite consciousness, differentiated out of the one Jnana-akasa. Due to the delusion of mind, mental, the wave which belongs to the ocean identifies itself as a wave. Similarly, the jiva instead of identifying with the Supreme Parabrahma, identifies with the lower self. Hence King Padma is created. Similarly your husband now has a second birth, as Vijayartha. Therefore after giving your ears to what I am going to relate to you, you shall have your doubts cleared. In the stainless and immaculate spiritual ether, there is, on one side of it, an illusory dome. This vault is covered by the infinite consciousness. It resounds with the never-ceasing sound arising out of the strife between devas and asuras, due to great egoism. It is, in such an incomparable universe, that there was a town called Girigrama in the midst of a certain tract on one side and that, in a certain spot of that dome, that town was a fertile tract boasting of the possession of hills, rivers and forests. There lived in it a great Brahmin householder called Vasishta. He had a pious, obedient, well-mannered and beautiful wife who went by the name of Arundhati. While this Vasishta, the lord of the above-mentioned Arundhati, was residing with him in the valleys, a crowned king came to the forest there on a hunting excursion along with his retinue. The rishi saw them and reflected within himself, "When shall I be able to be the ruler of the earth with retinues encircling me with people? When shall I be able to reign triumphant as a monarch, having all under my sway with beautiful women around me?" From that day forward, Vasishta was seized with intense desires and though, in eager anticipation of the realization of such desires, he went on performing karmas regularly. His lady implored me for aid like yourself and was blessed by me with the similar boon of her husband's jiva, ego self, not leaving her house. The Brahmin, Vasishta expired thus with his longing after regality ungratified. Thus was he of the nature of jiva akas in his house. Through the sankalpa of the mind which led into the pleasures of regality, Vasishta who was originally of the nature of the Jnana-akas, he became a king. In that state, after his wife found him dead she left her gross body and joined him in his subtle body. While the Brahman's sons, house, lands, forests, mountains, and others were thus, in the gross state, his jiva was living separate for about 8 days and was of the nature of Chidakas, mental ether, in that very house. In your former birth, this Brahman is your husband. Then you are his wife, going by the name of Arundhati. Both of you lived together as husband and wife. like the loving Parvati and Parameswara. Living on the left side of the earth are no other than Arundhati and Vasishta. The first creation as a Brahmin and also the creation of King Padma are all illusory. Even the third creation of Vajratha birth which you were a witness of, is also unreal, like the reflected image in water. So said Goddess Saraswati, the world's mother. On hearing these words, Leela questioned her, "You have uttered untruth only. How can your words hold? Where is the jiva of the Brahman that lived in this house? Where did we, who separated here, meet together? How did those who were in the other world as well as its hells, the 10 quarters and others join together and come to this pleasant habitation of ours? Is it possible to bind the infuriated Indra's elephant within a part of a mustard seed? Will the Mahameru mountain enter a lotus seed and be crushed by a small bee sitting over it? Will the lions be vanquished in a war with the angry ants and then enter an atom? All your words are as incredible as these and will not fit in with truth." To which the goddess replied thus, "I never told you an untruth. I will now explain you how my words are true. Persons like myself will never derogate from the laws of Parameswara but will hold to them as the true ones. The Brahman's jiva lives invisibly in his own house in the city. All his kingdom and Padma creation are of the nature of Jnana Akasa only. Now, O Leela, Vasishta of the nature of Chidakas, when he became overjoyed, with the sight of the king, saw all these things in the Manasakas. All these are different modifications of the one infinite consciousness. This old thought, or creation, of Vasishta without manifesting itself as such to you now appears to you as different, as Padma creation. Just as the many events of the Jagrata, waking, state are not enacted in the dreaming state, Padma creation and its thoughts do then predominate without the reminiscences of the Vasishta state. Out of the above-mentioned all-pervading Jnanakas shining through Sat, which is its own power and form part essence of that, Jnana Akasa arose this terrible universe through the thought of the mind, like an image reflected in a glass. All the shining universes will be latent as light within the Jnana reality, which is illuminated in the supreme atom, Parabrahma. Therefore it is that the above-mentioned earth and others of the Brahman will manifest themes of in, and out of, Jnana. Now you know all these directly. So said Saraswati. Leela asked her, "It was stated by you, that the Brahman expired on the 8th day. That period passed with me as millenniums. Please explain this to me." Then the goddess continued thus: "Just as space is nothing but a play of infinite consciousness, time and space is unreal. In the dream state consciousness what appears like a lifetime is nothing but 1 hour in waking state consciousness. What appears like 1 year in one world is 1 day in a different world. There are worlds within worlds. Just as a man can experience dream, waking and deep sleep states of consciousness. The Jnana light alone devoid of the modifications of Maya, that manifests itself as time and space, hence there is no such thing as the limit of time or space. Through the illusion of death, the body became entranced for a moment and the jiva parted from it. Becoming oblivious of all the thoughts of its former body, it is filled with the thoughts of this life only. It is only when the jiva revives from the fatal trance of such false conceptions, only then that the jiva will begin to know its real state. Therefore you forgot all about your former birth, remembering only this birth." After Saraswati had finished these words, Leela said, "Having been blessed by you with divine vision, I have understood all things truly. Now to gratify my desires, please show me the abode of Vasishta and others." To which Saraswati of the former Vedas thus said, This gross body of yours bred out of karmas is an impediment in the way of your getting such knowledge. You need to become entirely oblivious of your body, by becoming bodiless, and know yourself as distinct from it. You will then become of the nature of pure bliss and joy that is also jnana light and sat after being cleansed of all Maya impurities. You will then be able to visit the hallowed seat. Then you will know, with delusions off your mind, that Brahman only is yourself and all the universe, like one gold converted into many ornaments. It is not the worldly desires but the pure vasanas that tend to develop the true jnana, self-knowledge. You are still attached to the desires for worldly objects. Therefore it is not possible for you to attain it. Persons like myself can easily get into the pure Brahman. But those who are like you, have a subtle, lunar, body of the nature of mind, replete with desires, and hence it, in turn, generates the gross body. Just as a snowball melts with the rays of the sun and is converted into water, so your gross body will be changed permanently into the subtle body through development of the true jnana, self-knowledge, and the abandoning of the vasanas, psychological conditioning of the mind. This is the Jivanmukti state. Then the all-full jnana alone will prevail in you. Therefore you will have to perceive the former creation through your original subtle body, of a Divaya. Leela asked Saraswati as to the efforts that should be made to realize that end. To which Saraswati replied thus: those only can cognize experimentally the higher states who have developed in themselves the processes of Sravana, hearing and study of spiritual books, Manana, contemplation, and Niyasana, reflection from all standpoints, uninterrupted bliss arising through concentration upon that ancient, one, principle, renunciation of all non-desires, and the intense reasoning practice followed through the path of Vedas that this great world is not ever existent. Those only are in that path of Brahman, who are ever engaged in the intense practice of deriving bliss through the certain knowledge that the universes, which are no other than I or it, do not really exist. They did not exist from the very beginning. People who are engaged in liberation, through such knowledge, free from the knower and the known and from the enemies of love and hatred. One needs to be convinced that knowledge which renders itself free of all the visibles, duality, is the true one. The obtainer of Atma, with ceaseless endeavors in the certainty of Brahman, is alone salvation. With such a practice, the pure jnana, self-knowledge, will dawn. Saraswati and Leela, who had thus conferred together that night, went into Swarupa Samadhi free from the trammels of their body and remained motionless. In this state, Saraswati, shining with her former jnana body along with Leela with her newly assumed jnana one, rose up high in the sky of ether. Having penetrated far into the ether, which is like an ever-ebbing great ocean at the time of deluge, they observed that the following. In an immeasurable, transparent and subtle Chidakas replete with the bliss, there were to be found the hosts of Siddhas who journeyed fleeter than wind. They passed through diverse places for the immeasurable distance, some replete with petrified sable gloom inaccessible to any and many others. Thus waded they through the akasa of the three worlds, wherein the myriads of jivas created by Brahma buzzing like the swarms of flies collected in a ripe fig fruit. Then contemplating upon reaching their longed-for place, they crossed numerous worlds and reached Kiragrama in the loka where Vasishta lived. As the new arrivals were invisible to the menials, relatives and offsprings of the Brahman suffering from dire pains, Leela, of Satya Sankalpa, willed that the inmates of the house should see her and her co-mate. Thereupon taking these two, who were like Lakshmi and Parvati, to be some goddesses, her kids worshipped them and paid them proper respects. Of these, the eldest son addressed them thus: you should enlighten us of the load of grief under which we are groaning ever since the demise of our parents. O ladies of great knowledge, are there any results not attainable through the visits of great personages like yourselves? Thereupon the effulgent Leela touched their forehead and relieved them of their grief. Leela asked Saraswati, how come that during our samadhi, the persons seated in the regal assembly were unable to see me whilst those in the beautiful house alone were so able? Saraswati replied, it is only through the development of jnana that all the dual substances in this world will become non-dual. You were in possession of jnana, knowledge, but not freed from the thoughts of I, or individuality. The true sankalpa did not arise in you. Hence it was that all those in the royal assembly were not able to see thee. But then in the second case, with the possession of the true self-knowledge and without the thoughts of individuality, you versus I, through your own sankalpa, determination, your sons could see you. Then Leela overjoyed gave vent to the following words, through your grace, O Saraswati, I have known all my former births as clear as daylight. I have cleansed myself of all sins arising from the three gunas. After being differentiated as a separate entity out of the one Brahman, I have undergone different births in 800 bodies. Like bees in a lotus flower, I have been inhabiting the many worlds created through Maya Vikalpa, or the modifications of Maya. I was born as a Vidyadhara lady and then as a human being through the force of vasanas. In another loku of Maya Vikalpa, I went through a series of births in the different bodies of Indrani, a huntress clad in leaves, a bird rending the snare it was enmeshed in, a king of Saurashtra country and a mosquito. Thus have I been whirling in many births, and having been tossed to and fro in the clutches of Maya, like a straw in ocean waves, I have now been landed safely on the shore of Mukti, salvation, through your aid. Thus did Leela eulogize her and both then mounted up the sky. Passing through the sky by the dint of yoga power, they went to where Padma was and saw his body. After that was over, they went to where the king Vijayaratha was, who was the second incarnation of King Padma. At this juncture, both these ladies observed the incomparable king of Sindhu of tremendous prowess march against Vijayaratha. A fierce war was waged between the two armies, striking terror into the heart of death even. Vijayaratha's innumerable army was reduced by the enemy to an eighth of its original number. Then the sun disappeared from view, as if afraid of either this terrible war. With the setting in of intense darkness, both the armies ceased to battle. With the disappearance from the field of the enemy's hosts, King Vijayaratha returned with a broken heart along with the shattered remnants of his army to his own palace. Whilst he rested upstairs in sleep, Saraswati and Leela came up to where he lay. Being quite refreshed by their tejas, radiant effulgence, he saluted and eulogized the ladies. Saraswati, in order to enable the king to easily know the events of his former births through his jnana, spiritual vision, touched lovingly, with the palm of her hand, the king's head and blessed him with divine vision. Whereupon the gloom of Maya that had obscured his mind disappeared, and he was able to recognize himself in the previous body of King Padma sporting with Leela. Then the pleasant sensation of marvel and joy arose in him, the former on account of the diverse workings of Maya, and the latter, since the knowledge of Maya he derived through the grace of the goddess Saraswati. He said, in the one day that passed from the extinction of my former body up to now, as seen through my divine vision, I have spent 70 years with this my present body. I have also known all the events that transpired during that period. Whence are all these curious anomalies of Maya? Thereupon Saraswati replied, The trance called death is always accompanied at that very spot and in that very instant by the great delusion of rebirths, and vice versa. Now the conception of the duration of 70 years arose only through the delusion of the karmas performed by you while in life. Know therefore and perceive for yourself that when your mind was rendered immaculate like akasa, free from all illusions, such conceptions of time vanished. All conceptions of time arise through the vikalpas of the mind only. The events of 70 years are only like long-drawn dreams of many events enacted in 1 muhurta, 48 minutes. Even our life during the waking state appears prolonged in diverse ways through the many unreal events performed. To tell you truly, there is no such thing as births or deaths to thee. All is true self-knowledge alone. You are the eternal supreme seat. Hence though seeing the whole universe, you see it not. Being of the nature of all, you are shining through your wisdom in the Atmic reality. To the ignorant, the universe appears to be real. Persons ignorant of gold will assert an ornament made of gold to be the former alone and not the latter. Likewise, persons devoid of spiritual vision will maintain this universe to be the inert one only, and not spirit, the seer free from the seen. Know also all the universes, arising through the egoism of time and space and mine, etc., to be nothing but a dream, and the different objects seen therein to be as illusory as things in a dream. Such objects and universes are no other than the nature of that jnana, reality, which is all permanent, actionless, full, vast and immaculate. It is the one reality which, being all and having all with the different saktis, potencies, manifests itself, without being diminished thereby, in different forms according to the fructification of time and karmas, actions performed with the ego self. Through Leela, I have initiated you into the mysteries of the true jnana, self-knowledge, state. Your mind has been illumined through the undecaying tattva, truth. Therefore we shall depart. Vajratha remarked thus, even persons coming to me for aid are accustomed to receive at my hands whatever they long for. Therefore is it surprising for me to attain any object of my quest at the hands of you both who are like fresh chintamani. When shall I be able to resume my former body of Padma? To which Saraswati replied thus: You will perish in this war, and with your death, you will resume your Padma body. Here a messenger came in with the following announcement to the king. An ocean of army is discharging showers of arrows at us, and our town is reduced to ashes through the enemy's flames. Now Leela, the spouse of Padma, was extremely surprised to find Leela, the spouse of Vajratha, an exact counterpart of herself, like an image reflected in a glass. Thereupon she queried Saraswati as to how it was she was reduplicated afresh. Saraswati cleared her doubts in the following manner: due to excessive love towards you, your husband Padma thought, at the moment of death, of enjoying your company without being ever separated. Accordingly he was able to get you here. Whatever is thought of by one at the time of his agonizing death, that will be realized by him afterwards. Will a glass reflect other than that which is placed before it? Death, birth, mental delusion, the waking, dreaming and dreamless states are all one, each of them not having another as the cause. All things that are and that are not, are of the nature of delusion only, and hence increase beyond number. Now the stainful enjoyments are of two kinds. Some experiences arise as the result of former ones. Others arise newly, being entirely different from the previous ones. Hence, as in the former case, the new Leela with all your former form, observances, race and conduct of life, appeared not different from you like your shadow. It was through the thought of the king, that she was molded into her present form like yourself. Vidyartha will perish in this war and then assume the body of Padma. So said Saraswati, when the new Leela submitted thus, please confer on me the boon that, in the event of my partner perishes in this war, I may live in this body of mine along with him wherever he is. To which Saraswati nodded assent. Again the old Leela questioned the mother of Vedas thus, how was I able to journey to the higher loka and the supreme Girigrama with the aid of Adibhautaka body only and not with the Adivahika body, while the new Leela was blessed otherwise? To which the goddess replied thus. I never give anything, without any cause, to any person. People get all things according to their thoughts. You thought of acquiring jnana before and implored me for it, and I gave you therefore the divine vision longed for by you. This Leela, your shadow, prompted by excessive desire, asked of me another boon which was, as promptly, granted. All men through my grace get whatever their minds long after. Both the Leelas of undying affection for their king and yet in anticipation of his death addressed Saraswati thus, O mother, how comes it that in spite of our Lord's dauntless courage and your grace, our husband should die so soon in this war? Saraswati replied, as the learned Vidyartha longed after the higher spiritual state, he has to merge secondless into the supreme seat. The king of Sindhu prayed for victory in the war, while your husband prayed for enlightenment. This king of Sindhu in accordance with my mandates at his propitiation of myself and will become a king. While these were discoursing thus, the day broke and the battle started. King Vidyartha was felled by the enemy's arrows and fell flat upon the ground. Whereupon the new Leela addressed her of the white lotus thus, my husband is about to breathe his last. Please allow me to join my husband. Saraswati having prepared the way for it, the new Leela became light and ascended the akasa. Having crossed one after another the different worlds which exist in one another, in different planes of consciousness, she reached soon the immeasurable and endless reality of Chidakas at last. There she went to the place where Padma's dead body was lying, after crossing the Jnanakas. Concluding that the dead body covered up with flowers, was her lord's and that somehow, through Saraswati's grace, she came ahead of him, she sat beside his body and fanned it gently. Saraswati removed the grip she had on the jiva of Vidyartha, which therefore entered into the nasal orifice of Padma's body in the form of prana and permeated the whole parched-up body. Whereupon blood began to circulate freely throughout and the deceased king woke up, rubbing his eyes. Padma woke up and asked who they were. The old Leela prostrated herself before the king and saw that she herself was the wife congenial to him, that the new Leela was the offspring of his mind which thought of a form similar to hers and came to enjoy with him, and that the third person was the immaculate Saraswati. After she had pronounced these words, Padma fell at the feet of Saraswati who, laying her beautiful hands on the head of Padma, blessed him with a long life with his wives, an exalted fame and an ever-increasing wealth in order to render people happy. Then the Emperor Padma along with his wives wielded the scepter over the earth for 80,000 years. With the blessing conferred by Saraswati, he shortened then and there the 7 kinds of births and attained on earth the Jivanmukta state. At last he attained the state of Videhamukti which never perishes, even though great kalpas come to an end.